We have our work cut out for us. Our country is in rough shape. I really think that our country has been destroyed by basically successive Trudeau governments. The first government under Pierre Trudeau, where he erased all of our symbols, he distanced ourselves from the crown and from our tradition, and he sort of rewrote the entire narrative of what it means to be Canadian in a sort of liberal image. And he was, I think he was the first socialist prime minister of our country. The second one was his son, Justin Trudeau. And under 9 years, almost 10 years of that government, it is remarkable how much our country has fallen. And so we have our work cut out for us, but that is why we are here. That is why we continue to fight. I truly believe that one of the things that Canada needs to fight back and to have a fighting chance at surviving and not turning into a Venezuela North is a free and independent media. And that is why we do what we do here at Juno News. That is why we continue to fight. So look, folks, we have a special episode for you today. I have Cian Bexley, my co-founder, in the studio. We flew out from Calgary out to Ontario. We're going to be recording a fireside chat a little later today for our paid subscribers only. So if you want to see that, head on over to junonews.com, become a premium subscriber, and you will be able to access that. So since I have Cian in the studio, I decided to turn things over to him today, and he has some thoughts on the state of our country and specifically about Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and what Cian thinks Poilievre needs to do to fight for Canada and to live another day as leader of the Conservative Party. So I am going to vacate the studio and turn things over to Cian, and you will hear a great presentation from him. So over to you, Cian.
Thanks, Candace. It's great to be here in your studio in Ontario. I want to talk today about the three things that Pierre Poilievre must do in order to win and beat Mark Carney in the next election and even to get on his feet in this parliament. Pierre Poilievre is the most popular Conservative leader in our generation. He built a coalition that stretched from Bay Street all the way to backcountry Alberta, and he dominated the airwaves. He set records for online reach, and even after the 2025 loss, millions of Canadians still believe that he is the right guy to lead this country. But this past election showed us something interesting. It's not enough to be right. You have to fight the right fights at the right time in the right way, or else somebody else is going to define the terms for you. And that is exactly what happened in 2025. Mark Carney walked into the role of responsible adult in the room, while Pierre, a man who's devoted his entire career to fighting for the taxpayer, was caricatured by the CBC as risky, unstable, and even Trumpian, which was not true, but the ballot box question got completely hijacked, and they let it happen. Here's one of the hard truths. Pierre didn't lose this election on ideas or on qualifications. He lost it on narrative, and that can be fixed, but it means making some changes, ones that are not easy, but ones that are definitely necessary if he wants to win the next election. Here are the three things that I think Pierre Poilievre must do to take back Canada. Number one, he needs to set the agenda or be buried by theirs. In 2025, Canadians voted on a question they didn't even know they were answering. Are you scared of Donald Trump? Of course, the answer was yes, and the answer was not Pierre Poilievre. This wasn't Pierre's fault, but it became Pierre's problem. Every time he tried to talk about inflation or housing or freedom, the Liberals, with a little help from the CBC, changed the subject. And instead of bulldozing through it, our side let them. Carney ran on competence, calm, and credibility. He offered a tax cut, a military budget, and a quiet return to the status quo. And after a decade of Justin Trudeau, that sounded pretty appetizing to Canadians. But underneath that, he's still the same globalist banker who brags about his Rolodex in Davos. He gave the United States first refusal on Canadian strategic minerals. He signed a massive pact with the EU just days into his term. He didn't stand up to Trump. He traded our sovereignty for a seat at his table. He's on his leash now. That should have been the ballot question, but it wasn't. Pierre has got to go into the next election setting the terms, not reacting, not rebutting, leading. That means driving the conversation towards ideas that Canadians actually care about, like fairness for women and protecting kids from transgender ideology. That means deporting illegal migrants and going scorched earth on Canada's immigration system. It needs to be completely revamped, reconsidered, and brought down to nearly zero, if not a negative system, a country where rules and laws mean something again, and rebuilding the high trust society that Canadians who lived in the 1900s remember from the 1900s. The Canada that we're living in is unrecognizable to what it was in the 1980s. These aren't fringe issues, they're majority issues, they're moral issues. And when we avoid them, voters think that we're scared, that we don't want to talk about what really matters. But when we lead with courage and clarity, even critics start to respect us. In short, we need to be the ones asking the question, not the ones trying to answer it, not the ones responding to what Rosemary Barton is angry about on any given day. Now, the second thing that Pierre needs to do is embrace Alberta and respect its instincts. Let's be clear, Alberta has never turned its back on Pierre Poilievre. In 2025, Conservatives won with like 63% of the vote here, up 8 points. The Conservative Party took almost all of the seats, and it was Alberta MP Damien Carrick who stepped up and said, come on to my riding, we've got your back. Conservatives have each other's back like family, but even family has expectations. And here's what Alberta expects: a leader who doesn't treat us like a region to be managed, but as a partner to be respected. Alberta is a place where people believe in hard work, fairness, and freedom, but it's also a place that's tired of being told what it's allowed to even want. When Cam Davies ran on an independence platform in Olds Didsbury Three Hills and got 17% of the vote, media said Alberta has spoken. But let's be honest, that was a vote against Cam Davies, not against the idea of Alberta independence. If a real serious referendum was held with a clear question, the numbers would be much, much higher. Here's the opportunity. Pierre doesn't have to endorse separation. He just has to respect Albertans enough to make the decision on their own. If Pierre does that, Alberta will go to war for him. If he doesn't, someone else will fill that space. Lastly, and very importantly, he needs to let the grassroots lead again. Pierre built this movement from the ground up. He's a campaigner, a fighter, a hustler, but over time, the party around him started making backroom decisions that don't reflect the same ethic. In 2025, we saw riding after riding where local members were shut out of nominations. Candidates were parachuted in, often last minute, often for optics. Good people were disqualified without explanation. Michael de Jong in BC was one of them. A former finance minister with 5 balanced budgets, blackballed. Why? No one knows. But you can look at who replaced him. Or take Brampton, where every single Conservative candidate was of one background, not because they earned the nomination, but because someone in charge of appointments thought that that's what the community wanted. The problem isn't diversity. The problem is tokenism. Canadians can tell the difference, and frankly, most Conservatives don't want either. The irony is, when you let local members choose their candidate, they usually pick a winner. Pierre needs to own this moment, and he should promise an overhaul of the nomination process. Every riding gets a vote. Every riding gets to choose who will represent them on the ballot. No more late appointments, no more appointing people because of their last name or of what church they go to. No more trust us, we know best from Ottawa. That alone would electrify the base. When nomination votes happened, largely good candidates won. And while we're at it, let's talk about the front bench. Pierre is a strong leader, but next to Mark Carney, he needs a wingman who's lived a different life. Not someone who's been in politics or a policy nerd, someone who speaks human. Someone like a nurse, a vet, a trucker, a business leader, someone who hasn't spent the last 20 years in Parliament. Not that there's anything wrong with that. The movement just needs someone to complement Pierre. The movement is bigger than Ottawa. And let's show Canadians what Canada actually looks like. Here's the bottom line. Pierre Poilievre is still the most important political leader in Canada. He has a larger, more durable coalition than Mark Carney, deeper grassroots, and a better instinct for the moment than anyone else. But even the best leaders need course corrections. This isn't about abandoning what worked. This isn't about abandoning the team. It's about doubling down and making sure that the next time voters don't just hear the Conservatives, they believe them. If Pierre sets the agenda, respects Alberta, and opens the gates to the base, he can beat Mark Carney. He will beat Mark Carney. Most importantly, he can rebuild this country into a country that we can recognize.